I am going to share a few words. My words are going to thank the 8th grade for their leadership and how deeply they put themselves into this process. And special applause to the teachers, and you'll hear about this, who have taken what had customarily been a long survey within 8th grade history and took the students to a depth that is extraordinarily unusual for this age. And Dennis Cullinan is a hero for bringing it to us. And it was a chance meeting at Breakwater Books, Dennis. Well, not a chance, it was a forced meeting where we jumped right on. We're quite proud of it. The other note, just by way of a brief welcome, is how admiring we are of Todd Vetter and the Congregational Church. You've been brave partners with us in this, and you're recognizing your past and confronting the past, and I think we're all better for a school community and a wider Madison community and Shoreline community because of the courage you've brought to this with your congregation. So thank you for hosting us, and thank you for being great partnership, Todd Vetter. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Good morning, all. Welcome. The thanks are all ours, not yours to make to us, but ours to make to you. We appreciate the privilege of sharing this moment with you. As John mentioned, my name is Todd Vetter. I serve currently as the senior minister of the First Congregational Church here, and I'm here today with our minister of community life, the Reverend Sarah Vetter, our sexton Wally Stone, our head deacon Charles Reese. And on behalf of all of the friends and members of the community of the First Congregational Church, it is sincerely our gratitude that we express to you, again, for the privilege of sharing in this event. So we are deeply, deeply grateful to the 8th grade class, their teachers, the staff and administration of the country school for all that you've done to make this moment possible. Some of you may be familiar with the biblical character Tamar. She appears briefly in the book of Genesis. Her time on the biblical stage is brief, but it's powerful. She is noteworthy for having been wrongly accused by people of some moral behavior severe enough for her father-in-law Judah to call for her death. And she's being brought out to be punished, to be burned. And at that moment, she raises her voice in defense. She raises her voice to reframe the story that is being told about her, to hold up a mirror of sorts to the presumed righteousness of the leadership and people of her community. And in doing so, she sort of stakes her place, right? Commands this ground in that great prophetic biblical tradition which rises to speak truth to power, whose voice resonates beyond the boundaries of her own life into the life of every age. So I'm hoping that we can assume that in her time in Madison, the Tamar whose life we commemorate this morning with this stone found ample ways to reframe the story told about her to claim that dignity and humanity that enslavement sought to rob her of. And like her namesake, I hope as well that we can see this Tamar and her daughter Lettuce as well as something of prophets in their own right. People who held up a mirror to the presumed righteousness of us and our society, our community, this town, that for so long has failed to tell the full story of our people, of people like Tamar and her daughter Lettuce, and the many, many enslaved people who were residents of what was then East Guilford. So again, we are grateful to you, students and faculty, staff, and administration of the country school, for your work in raising up Tamar's voice, for allowing her story to breathe in our time, to invite reflection and, most importantly, confession upon our whole community, but the community of First Congregational Church in particular. Complicit as we have been not only in her enslavement, but in failing to acknowledge fully her existence, the dignity and rich humanity with which she lived, and to resign her story, the story of her life, to the shadowed margins of our own history. So I invite you at this point to please join me in a spirit of prayer, calling upon what is holy in this world to be present in this time, to bless this time with wisdom, discernment, contrition, and hope, that as time unfolds, we will continue to hear the stories waiting to be told again and again. Let us be together in a spirit of prayer. Holy One, God, eternal and everlasting, we call upon you by many names out of a great wealth of traditions that enrich our common life. We call upon you to be present in this time of remembrance as we gather to give that honor too long belated to the life of Tamar, mother and artisan, friend and fellow citizen of this community. Holy One, in every tradition, in every age, you raise up prophets to speak faithfully to the powers that seek to repress the full flourishing of human dignity and freedom, to call upon your people to acknowledge and repent of those sins that make us complicit in the enslavement of our sisters and brothers. So we call upon you, O God. We call upon your presence to bless this hour as we give thanks for this generation of prophets, students and teachers who call us to confession, whose work summons us to open our ears, our lives, to those stories too often rejected and ignored, those voices too often silenced. So come, O God, into this time. Bless this commemoration of your child Tamar for the richness of her life, for the story that enslavement could not fully diminish. May this stone serve always as a reminder to us that the work begun today is never finished. The story never fully told until that day when all that oppresses your people in every place is forever banished. This we pray in all the names we use to call upon you, O God. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Vetter. I'm Liz Lightfoot. I'm one of the 8th grade history teachers this year, and my colleague Jamoki McDuffie-Thurmond is over there. Our 8th graders are here, and I'm going to ask them to come up now, and you can stand in the shade back here because I know it's hot. Hey guys. All right, we are going to start with 2 students who wanted to offer a land acknowledgement. So, may I call up Molly and Joshua, please?
In our 8th grade U.S. history class, we began the year by exploring the history of the Americas and the indigenous communities who lived and still continue to live here. One of our first assignments was to research the specific land we stand on. Before we talk about our work to restore the forgotten history of enslavement and enslaved people in Madison, we would like to take a moment to honor the people who have been living and working on this land since time immemorial. Can't breathe. Since time immemorial.
Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. This morning we are standing on the ancestral land of the Wappinger, Hammonassets, and Quinnipiac. Please take a moment to honor these individuals and communities, past and present, as we consider the many legacies that bring us here today.
All right, I was going to give a little background about this project to say that this is the 2nd year in a row that we've done this. Last year, as Reverend Vetter said, we honored Latouche. This year we are honoring her mother, Tamar. I don't think I'm going to go into much more detail because the students will be reading a biography, which will really shed light on at least what we've been able to find out about Tamar's life. But I wanted to very quickly thank everyone for being here, and particularly I want to thank Reverend Todd and Sarah Vetter, Reverends Todd and Sarah Vetter. Pat Wilson-Phineas, our keynote speaker, I can't wait until you hear her because she is exactly the reason that this work is important, and she will share her story with you, and we are so grateful and honored to have you with us. I also wanted to thank Sibaya, who will be joining us later. Siba's not here yet, I don't think, but she's going to lead us in song at the end. She's remarkable. I want to thank the leadership of the town of Madison, who were delighted last year when our students presented at a selectmen's meeting to support this project, and we are so grateful for their support here as well. I wanted to thank my co-teacher, Jamoke McDuffie Thurman, who is uniquely brilliant, really transformed this project last year when he suggested that students not just write a biography, but write poetry, so they could emotionally connect with this content and focus on the questions that they still have, it really had a profound impact on our students last year, and I'm just delighted to be co-teaching with him this year, throughout the year. It's been a really, really wonderful year, exploring many aspects of U.S. history. I would like to thank my other co-teacher, Kristen Liu, our English teacher, who is a remarkable partner in all of this, and Kristen and our wonderful, wonderful colleague Heather Butler, who sadly moved to Maine, led this project last year, and their legacy in this project has been instrumental. I want to thank Devin Coles Garcia and Ibrahim Mohammed, where I don't see where you guys are. Thank you so much for your help. You really gave us a lot in this project and throughout the year. And then I just wanted to say as well, first of all, I'm sorry, 8th graders, you are the stars. You did an amazing job here, and I'm really, really proud of what you did, and the fact that so many of you wanted to speak today. That speaks volumes. And then finally, I just wanted to say this project is modeled after the Stolperstein or Stumbling Stones projects, which began in Germany to honor and remember victims of the Holocaust. The project's founder, artist Gunter Demnig, cites the Talmud in talking about his work, saying, "A person is only forgotten when his or her name is forgotten." We are very happy to be able to include Tamar's name here, alongside that of her daughter, Latus. And now I'm going to call on Luke, Nadia, Alex, and Marla, who will read a biography, which is really a composite of the individual biographies students did. This project helped them, in terms of research and writing historical narratives, but also they had to do citations. And I want to thank Mr. Ibrahim for his wonderful, wonderful assistance with that. So, without further ado, Luke.
Based on our research, we believe Tamar was born sometime around 1744 in a region of Africa, then called Guinea, much larger than the present-day country of Guinea. 18th century Guinea extended from the Atlantic coast of West Africa into parts of what is now considered Central Africa. We do not know what name Tamar was given by her parents when she was born. Based on our research, we believe she was taken from her family and her home and forced onto a ship. We believe she endured the Middle Passage and that, after crossing the Atlantic, she arrived somewhere in East Guilford, or what is now called Madison. On the opening page of his 1876 book of family history, John Todd, the story of his life, told mainly by himself, author of Jonathan Todd, writes about his great-uncle, Reverend Jonathan Todd, the second pastor of this church. It so happened that there was a vessel cast ashore near his house, and from the wreck, several Africans directly from Guinea emerged, John Todd writes. I never knew all the circumstances, but they came into his hands. He then goes on to describe how Reverend Todd gave these people scripture names, Cush, Tamar, and the like.
So Nadia is next, and
we know little about Tamar's life in the years immediately following her arrival in Connecticut, although the John Todd book gives us some clues. According to the passage in the book, Reverend Todd, quote, made pets of them all, unquote, setting out to educate them with diverse schemes for their elevation. However, the author says that Reverend Todd appeared to abandon those plans. The book also describes a bond of affection and fidelity that grew between Tamar and Reverend Todd's nephews. This bond will emerge again in a later chapter of John Todd's book. The first time Tamar is mentioned by name in the archival records occurs in Reverend Todd's 1791 will. One of 8 enslaved people in this household, she is identified as the mother of Lettuce and the grandmother of Lettuce's 3 children, Zuki, Emma, and Peleg. We believe that Lettuce had at least 3 more children after she was emancipated. All are listed without surnames. Despite the fact that he enslaved as many as 8 people, a large number for a Connecticut resident, Reverend Todd writes in his will that he had long been convinced that slavery was a sin, and he was therefore granting them freedom.
Reverend Todd also seems to have granted Tamar and Lettuce items that could assist them in their newfound freedom. To both Tamar and Lettuce, he left land near the Thompson lot, a cow, household items, and bedding. Unfortunately, no records have been found to indicate that they ever received the land. Reverend Todd also specifically left Tamar a loom with weaving equipment and a brass kettle, moves which suggest that Tamar was both the weaver and the chef. A story in chapter 2 of the John Todd book sheds light on Tamar's cooking skills and also speaks to the notion of affection and fidelity. At this point, which we assume is about 10 years after emancipation, Tamar is living in Branford with a man named Prim, described as her husband. Timothy Todd, Reverend Todd's nephew, was now a doctor. He had been injured in a horse and cart accident and was on a journey to East Guilford when he found himself near a house where he heard Tamar was living. He apparently remembered her fondly from his childhood, when she had carried the doctor around in her arms. The book describes a joyful reunion. Quote, "The moment that Tamar heard the name, she came rushing out and climbed into the carriage, took up the doctor, crutches and all, and carried him into the house, as if he had been a child as of old, and she a strong young nurse instead of an old woman of more than 70 years." End quote. John Todd writes, quote, "Having placed him on a chair, she began to dance and caper about him, weeping and laughing at the same time, and making the most extravagant demonstrations of joy." End quote. Tamar then prepared a meal, described as, quote, "royal," end quote, with her guest declaring he, quote, "had never sat down to a better," end quote. Tamar's generosity to Timothy Todd was remarkable to many of us. As one student wrote, quote, "I can't imagine being kind to someone whose family enslaved me," end quote.
The next archival record we had found is from 1813, when the death of Tamar's husband Prim is reported in Branford's church records. After Prim's death, we assume Tamar moved back to East Guilford, where her daughter and grandchildren were still living, because her death records appeared in the East Guilford Congregational Church archives. In July of 1816, at 72 years old, Tamar died. The conclusion of our research into Tamar left us with so many questions. Aaron, Serena, Hayden, and will share a few of those questions.
Just as we were finishing the project, we learned additional news about 2 young men we believe were Tamar's grandsons, both born after the death of Jonathan Todd and after their mother's and grandmother's emancipation. Both were married in Old Saybrook, and one died by drowning about 10 years after his marriage. We wonder if they had children, and if so, whether we can find descendants.
We also learned about a possible connection between these 2 grandsons and a well-known family from Old Saybrook. One of the daughters in that family, Miranda Robinson, was an 8-year-old girl whose needlework is a part of the Connecticut Historical Society Museum and Library collection. Ironically, I chose to do needlework to depict Tamar's life. The connection between the families in Madison and Old Saybrook is something we would like to explore because there appears to be a marital tie.
Thank you, Serena. Serena just mentioned that she did needlework, which kind of mirrors what Miranda Robinson did. And if you see the artwork down there, the central one is Serena's needlework. Quite stunning.
We would love to know more about where the boat Tamar, Cush, and others arrived directly from Africa on was cast ashore. As the John Todd book says, how many other boats and people directly from Africa came to these shores?
We would also love to find out more about the land Tamar and Latouche were supposed to inherit. Was it a farm? If so, where would the land have been located? And are we sure they never got it? There is so much more to discover. We may not be able to find the answers ourselves, but we hope future students will.
All right, so now we're going to have 3 students read some of their original poems inspired by their exploration of these documents. And first up is Caitlin.
Did she? Did she know how to read? Tamar. Did she know how to look at a book? Could she speak English? Was she taught to read? Could she sit and enjoy a book? Could she understand the flow of the story or process the words written across the page? Jonathan Todd, her captor, he thought about it. At least he said he did. But we are fed so many lies, eagerly searching for answers to the questions that may not have them. We hold on to the lies, hoping that they are true, but the world isn't as messed up as it seems. It is, though. It truly is. But did she know how to read? Could she speak English? Could she? Was the promise kept or lost in a jumble throughout the years? Or maybe it never was. Maybe it was just an idea, a thought that rolled through his head like a tumbleweed. Did he ever even think about it, teaching her the basic fundamentals that we take for granted every day? Another unsolved question. Another question to keep us up late at night. Another question that drives the curious in us mad. We don't know. There are so many things that we are unaware of. Did she know how to read? Tamar.
A girl and a legacy. How does a girl, taken from her home in Africa, a girl who lost her freedom and her family, a girl who survived the Middle Passage, a girl who was wrongfully enslaved, how did she still care for others, help every person she knew, respect all? How did she still love? She seems to have loved everyone. She loved and cared for Timothy Todd, even though his uncle enslaved her. There was nothing they could do to stop her from loving. She loved everyone, no matter their name, their gender, their title, the money they have, the color of their skin, no matter where they were born. And her name was Tamar. Tamar saw the beauty in the world. She knew the cruelty and unfairness in the world, yet she knew how to balance it all. Tamar was a mother, a grandmother, a caregiver, a cook, a wife, a survivor, and most importantly of all, Tamar was a kind and loving human being. Tamar was born free. She died free. She lived looking for the beauty in the world, while not forgetting the cruelty, flaws, and inequality of the world. Tamar was a girl and had a legacy. Thank you.
All we know. Tamar. 5 letters. Almost all we have to remember who she was. We have documents, wills, and records and sales, but this is not who she was. Tamar. Tamar. She was more than just a word with 5 letters on a list, among barrels of alcohol, pots and pans, bedding and blankets. She was her own person that even we can't bring back. We can try. We can try. We can try to honor her and what she did. We can try to call her caring and strong, but even us, after spending months researching her, trying to bring her back to life, can't know who she truly was. She was not just a slave. She was a human. She deserves this. She got nothing her whole life, so maybe after her life, we can try to give her something. Tamar.
So next, Cooper, will introduce our keynote speaker, Pat Wilson-Phineas, and she will bring context to all of what you've learned so far.
We are honored today to welcome Pat Wilson-Phineas to join us as our keynote speaker. A former state representative and state commissioner of social services, Mrs. Phineas was born in Willimantic, Connecticut, grew up in Ashford, and earned her BA in English, her master's in social work, and her JD from the University of Connecticut, where she also served as a trustee. In addition to her roles in state government, Ms. Phineas served as a professor of social work and, for a time, lived in Denver, Colorado, where she served as Director of Human Services for the city and county of Denver. These days, back in her home state, Ms. Phineas has turned her attention to a new endeavor, serving the Witness Stones Project as co-chair of its board and directors. In this role, she maintains a grueling speaking schedule, sharing her story with audiences, like this one, because she is convinced that unearthing the stories and memorializing the struggles and accomplishments of enslaved people will change lives, local communities, and our country for the better. Thank you, Ms. Phineas, for sharing your story, your work, and your passion with us. You are an inspiration.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And you, sir, and all of you children are the ones who are inspiring. I met Liz Lightfoot in Lyme last week, and she shared with me a copy of the incredible job that you did for Lettuce. I was so impressed with the work, the poetry, the heart and soul that you've put into this project that I am just proud of you, even though I don't know you. Some might say that the witness stone is just a little stone, but I'd like to quote Chris Stiles in his poem, The Stone, from last year, where he said, "Even though it's just a stone, it carries the weight of a person." And I think that's profound and true. I'll bet through this process, positively engaging town leaders, researching the facts, culling through records, exposing yourselves to old ways and old laws, and uncovering people hidden by time. From that process, I think you learned something about the past and maybe something that will help you with a better future. I think that the process of going through all this has made you make observations that are important. The work of discovering people and rebuilding lives is hard, but it is worthwhile work. The Witness Stones program's process and methods gained a really special meaning for me when Dennis Culleton and the children of Adams Middle School in Guilford uncovered my family history. I know what that did for me, just as a single individual. So I want to share with you the impact of that new knowledge, what that did in my life, and I wanted to secure that gift for every child. Before I met Dennis and became involved with Witness Stone program, I knew my family only up through my great-grandparents. That was pretty much it. Dennis discovered me while researching the progeny of Montrose and Phyllis, two teenagers captured in Africa and brought to Guilford in 1727. He wound through 7 generations of my ancestors to find the obituary of a Tuskegee airman, my father, Lieutenant Colonel Bertram Wilson. At the time of his death in 2002, I was Commissioner of Social Services for the state, and that was noted in the article. Well, due to Dennis's research, it was some 16 years later on a sunny day in 2018 that Dennis tracked me down and in a 90-minute call filled me in on about 7 generations of lost family history. I learned that day that yes, my ancestors had been enslaved in Connecticut, but during those years of enslavement, family members had become a slave king and factotum, fought as a freedman in the Revolutionary War, been fiddlers and spinners, been memorialized in biographies and memoirs, been literate, owned and passed property on to their families, become ministers, one of whom mounted a movement to find homes in Africa for former slaves and died there trying. And all of this before the Civil War. I was amazed. I didn't even know there were slaves in the North, let alone thousands across all 13 colonies. I had been taught that Lincoln freed the slaves. The fact is, Connecticut's enslaved were freed by operation of law more than 25 years before the Civil War. I never knew that black men fought in the Revolutionary War. I mean, I knew there was Crispus Attucks. We learned about him, but I thought he was somehow an accident that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I did not realize that many black men fought in the Revolutionary War, and certainly I didn't know that my own fifth great-grandfather did. I ask you, when did you learn in school that as many as 5,000 black men, free and enslaved, fought as patriots in the Revolutionary War? Was it just now? When you don't know your full history, you cannot know your full value. This is as true for a nation as it is for an individual. Like so many black children, my family's history was lost, was hidden, or was somehow strayed from everyone's memory and attention. When I was the only black child in an Ashford classroom in the 50s, do you think it would have helped my self-esteem and the perspective of my childhood classmates to know that you don't have to be white to be a patriot? The gift of my history changed me. Knowing my history expanded my horizon. It increased my commitment to this country. It anchored me. Of course, some facts made me mad and some of it made me sad, but ultimately I was reoriented and invigorated by this knowledge. The new knowledge changed the way I look at myself and what I saw as my purpose. It made me appreciate my place in the history of this country. I am the 9th of 11 generations of an American family. Knowing this gives me a sense of belonging, ownership, and entitlement, not just to a family legacy, but to this nation. This knowledge made me love America more. You see, everything I'd been taught in school led me to feel that America was sort of my country by default, that I always kind of felt like I was somehow a lesser American. Why else would I see nothing of myself being taught to me in school about this country? Why else would some kids tease that I should go back to where I came from? With this new knowledge, I now know that America is mine because 300 years of my ancestors' blood, sweat, and tears earned her for me. My people didn't inherit America or get their rights as squatters or through the land grants freely given to others. They earned their place in our history and this land, and they shaped and fought for America's existence and freedom at a time when their own was denied to them. Factual historical information made me grateful that I was born in a time when I can control my own destiny and that I am strong enough to cherish the lessons of a time when I could not. It made me grateful that I live in a country with the honor and the endurance to want to grow. Learning my history made me proud of all that my forefathers had borne and had built. It made me curious about all else that I do not know. It made me want to uncover, discover, and share. It made me want to grow what I do not know and learn more about where others are coming from. People unfamiliar with this experience have asked me about this work. Doesn't looking back at slavery's history bother you? Why does it matter now? All those people are dead. Why make yourself relive the pain of people long gone when you can't ever change what was? Since you can't do anything about what has already happened, why doesn't knowing all this just make you feel bad? Well, I look to the wisdom of the Sankofa. The Witness Stones Project's logo is the Sankofa symbol. It's a bird with its feet looking forward, looking over its shoulder with a small egg in its mouth. The word Sankofa is from the Ashanti Twi language of the Akan people of West Africa, the area we now know as Ghana and the Ivory Coast. It's where most enslaved Africans began the Middle Passage to this new world. Literally, Sankofa means to return and get, the idea being that it's not wrong to go back to retrieve that which has been forgotten. It is good to find and recover what was lost or never known. In the Witness Stones program, we look back to uncover, remember, and bring into current vision things that happened hundreds of years ago. We look back at history so that we might understand who we really are, where we have been, where we are heading, and who we want to be. We seek to remember so that we might never forget how far we have come and whose shoulders we stand on. We recover so that we can acknowledge history, take what we will, and resolve to repair and do differently that which we do not like. We use original sources because facts speak for themselves. The knowledge that flows from fact doesn't demand that one feel bad or mad or guilty or sad. Knowledge only asks us to know, to acknowledge, to feel, and to grow. The Witness Stones program curriculum is a critical necessity for our state and country right now. It is critical not just because it acknowledges and restores the humanity stolen from Connecticut's enslaved people. It is critical because it creates in children an empathetic orientation to the hard facts of the past, and it does this for children of all colors. The program recognizes that a truthful telling of American history must include factual acknowledgement of the contributions of all Americans, young Americans, old Americans, new Americans, red, black, brown, yellow, and white-skinned Americans of all shapes, abilities, and orientations. Programs that support the truths of inclusion make it easier for us to recognize and correct the lies of omission. Witness Stone's curriculum provides place-based opportunities for the social and emotional development of critical elements of a student's learning, the development of compassion, empathy, and the ability to become comfortable with and discuss an inclusive American history. It is a hands-on and intimate interaction with the local history of a child's own town. Children exposed to the full range of human contribution and privilege can better understand why racism, sexism, exclusion, and discrimination cheat us all, and they can learn to take actions in their lives to eliminate such harm. As we courageously and unapologetically confront and take hold of America's history, we can more fully understand America's challenges. We can correct injustice and exclusion only if we acknowledge them. Only when we can acknowledge every American's unique contribution will we grow stronger together in respect and harmony as one American people. Let me close by directing myself to the children of Madison. You've done all this hard work. Thank you for that hard work. Thank you for the empathy for people whose lives in their own time were so sorely diminished. I think you've learned lessons for your future from this past. Your work recovered the lives of people who were used up, brushed under history's rug, and nearly forgotten. Tamar, who you honor with your words, got no recognition in her lifetime. We know so precious little about her because her life was not thought to matter much. Her past wasn't deemed important enough to record, her future was uncertain, her connection to Connecticut's history was almost erased. Memorializing her struggles makes her count. It begins to repair the untold damage done by the failure of too many teachers and most textbooks to acknowledge even the very existence of so many people like Tamar. When you use your voice to speak factually about the lives of people otherwise forgotten, you confirm their existence. You give their feelings, fears, frustrations, and hopes a voice. Before you, there was no voice. The act of recognizing their contributions not only validated their humanity, I'll bet it enhanced your appreciation of your own. Our history is not without pain, but neither is our present. Nor will our future be free of racial pain until we confront it, put it in perspective, eliminate its causes and its disparate outcomes. Real history is our children's right, it is their legacy, and it must be their truth. And when we do this right, the ability to discern, acknowledge, discuss, understand, and reconcile our collective history will be your children's power. With all my heart, I thank you for respecting those lost lives and giving back to Tamar and Latus the simple recognition that every human being deserves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. You are so inspiring, and I just want to give a shout out to Dennis Culleton, too, who unleashed this amazing, in addition to discovering your history, he unleashed this endeavor, and we are so, so blessed. We now have some more powerful poems. We have Rosie, Luke, and Molly.
Free. She was never free. Never, ever. Did she have her freedom? It may seem like she was. But when we think about it, was she ever free? She shouldn't have gotten to earn her freedom. She should have gotten it from the start. But no, she didn't, and she never did. She was freed, but not free. She had possessions, but she had no possession over her life. She was harmed, but she was not harmful. So why, oh why, could she never be free? Thank you.
Can you imagine being taken from your home, coming to an unfamiliar place where you don't know anyone and you don't speak their language? Can you imagine having your freedom taken away from you, just so some person that you don't know can have an easier life? Can you imagine being a slave, having to fight for your freedom, which everyone has taken for granted in the modern world? Can you imagine being called a pet of someone? We are all human beings here. No one should own anyone. This is America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Can you imagine having to start your life with a cow, a loom, and some land? You know who did it? Tamar, a woman who was taken from her home, lost her freedom, and was made a pet. And somehow, when the dust settled, she lived a long, peaceful life after her enslavement. Can you imagine? Thank you.
A small stone representing a big story. A small gold stone on the ground in front of Madison Congregational Church. Just a couple of lines. Caregiver, weaver, mother, and grandmother. Taken from Africa. Enslaved here, emancipated in 1791, circa 1744 to 1816. Her story is very complicated. It's a hard story to tell, although it should not be hard to tell. So many missing documents and so much lost humanity due to carelessness and disrespect. Spending days, weeks, months, years looking for information you're never going to find, and still having to infer and make educated guesses based on the information we were given. She cared about people. When Timothy Todd got hurt, she helped him and cared for him. We assume that she liked to weave because in documents it says she was given a loom. She was a mother to Latus Bailey and a grandmother to Latus's children. We're getting told lies daily, luckily finding out some of the truth 13 years after we were born and 205 years after she passed away. Her name is Tamar. This is not the name she was born with.
So we'll now hear a few words from Mr. Culleton, the founder of all of this. He's going to talk about this movement that he started. Thank you, Mr. Culleton.
Thank you all, and thank you for the students for your wonderful work. Pat, I just want to let you know that you got off easy. Ronan Mokrisky from Madison, who's now teaching up at Salisbury School, he said he starts his talk by saying he stopped for a cup of coffee in Guilford to meet with Dennis, and 4 hours later, boom, boom, boom. So, anyways, Liz told me I only have 45 minutes to speak, so I'll try to speed up. Thank you all for being here today. I am so grateful for the work being done here in Madison. Last year, in about March, everything changed, and we had a pandemic, and all the projects that we had in the hopper kind of stopped, and I even stopped doing the witness stones for a while because my phone stopped ringing and my email stopped, and did some work in Guilford for seniors, and then Heather Butler and Liz and Mrs. Louis and others said, "Oh, we're still doing this. We're still doing the Witness Stones project this year." So it felt like that installation ceremony we had in July. Yeah, August 1st. It felt like the light was still flickering, that the project was still here, and certainly with the sad deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and so many others, kids were getting ready to come back to school and say to their teachers, "Why is this happening? How can you help us understand the world we're in today when it doesn't make sense?" And that Black Lives Matter, why are people marching on the streets, and why are there protests, and what's happening? And I felt an urgent need to support my teachers and the next group of students to say, this is why it happened. That the idea that Black lives didn't matter in 1721 relates to why people have to march in 2021 to understand our country today. Liz spoke about this as a movement, and I think it took probably until about last month till I started realizing that all these different projects are coming together in kind of like a chorus, so all these different voices of students, and it's one voice. We had an installation ceremony in Greenwich and Norfolk and Killingly and Old Lyme, and we'll be doing one in Suffield next week, and Guilford and New Haven, and it feels like it's a growing voices, and each time I hear the students, I learn something new. I was an 8th grade U.S. history teacher. That's my skill set. That's my claim to fame. But I pretend to be a historian too. And taking these histories, I try to be like a dry historian. These are the facts. These are the data. And I still remember last year when we were talking about the stone for Latouche, and the kids were like, "Well, we want to put on the stone." I said, "I want you to put a skill that she had, that if she was a weaver or if she was a farmer or something." And they're like, "Can we put mother on the stone?" I said, "Yeah, you can put mother, but we're really looking for a skill set." And I'm sorry, and I'm like, and the kids were like, "Okay." So I said, "Well, why don't we put weaver and spinner and cook and mother?" They're like, "Can we put mother first?" And then all of a sudden, after arguing a few times, and poor Heather Butler was like, "Come on, Dennis, can we think through this?" And I was being a little stubborn, and I dug my heels in, and all of a sudden I had a drop the mic moment where these kids were humanizing Latouche so much that the most important person in their life, they realized, was their mother, and they wanted Latouche to be recognized as the most important person in her children's lives. And I'm gonna almost get emotional here. But but these kids taught me something, and today they taught me something with the poetry. And Jamoke, thank you for bringing poetry to this project. it really, as you know, was kind of on the sideline if some schools wanted to do it. But this year, and Pat can tell you, we're hearing poetry across the state of Connecticut of kids understanding that that's how they best can use these documents to tell a story in many ways. I love the narrative writing. I love the biographies. But these poems come from the students' hearts. And I'll just say that started with you and with our collaboration here last year. And if you followed us around, you know, Marilyn Nelson was speaking in Old Lyme. Marilyn Nelson, the former state poet, she spoke, and there were 3 other professional poets speaking, as well as many students. So, you know, I feel last year I felt like we were kind of the voice in the desert, you know, when we were putting the stone in on August 1st. And this year I feel like we're part of that movement. And I'm so excited to put the second, be with you all while we install the second stone in Madison. And we were already talking in the back, like, what are we doing next? You know, who are we going to work with? What stories need to be told in Madison? And we have this community to tell the story with. So I appreciate all of your support and hanging with us. And thank you, Lord, for a beautiful day and this wonderful ability to remember Tamar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for everything. We are so grateful. We have our 3 final student poems now, Sophie, Joey, and Michaela.
One of many. People taken from their homes, brought to an unknown place with unknown people and an unknown environment, ripped from the comforting arms of their families and thrown into the cold and scary world alone. And everyone says there is nothing to worry about. Then you hear of all the people who were enslaved in the very place you live. You hear of the horrible living conditions and treatment. But you only get to hear it if you're lucky. Most schools only dip a toe into the pool of challenging topics. Slavery is one of those topics. People tend to shy away and not share the importance of honoring everyone who was enslaved. Tamar was among the people who should be honored. From what we can tell, she was kind, caring for people when they needed it. She was a mother, wife, and grandmother. Tamar is one story. There are so many more people yet to be recognized and honored, looking past the pool of challenges to find a beautiful ocean full of stories.
Tamar's story. Cold, wet, alone, afraid, stolen. Shackles bite into not just the skin, but the soul as well. People stacked on people, like shipping containers on a cargo ship. A new home, longing, hoping, waiting. If only my words could have been the sword that protected her. Instead, I hope to protect her legacy. I strive to force people to remember her, to see her not as an enslaved woman, but as a cook, a weaver, a mother, just like yours. Now imagine your mother, bound, forced to work until her body grew too old and frail to continue. Imagine the sorrow, the pain. But also imagine the bonds she formed, the people she held dear until the light left her eyes. She grew to love her captor like how the bird loves its cage. She fought for her freedom and won. Remember her for not what she was, but who she is. Thank you.
Definitions. The definition of property is a thing or things belonging to someone, possessions collectively. The definition of a slave is a person who is the legal property of another and is forced to obey them. Does this really sum up the lives of so many before us? People who went through more than we could ever imagine don't deserve 15 words to describe what they went through. Tamar, a caregiver, weaver, grandmother, mother, cook, Those 15 words don't explain who she was. Born in 1744, Guinea, Africa, experienced the Middle Passage, crammed into a boat with a few others, no room to move around, not knowing what the future will hold. Taken together, tortured together. A thing or things belonging to someone, possessions collectively. A person who is the legal property of another and is forced to obey them. Strong, forgiving, caring, ambitious, dedicated, sincere, wholehearted, genuine, strong-willed, determined, attentive, thoughtful, considerate, compassionate, empathetic. These are the words that describe who she really was. We believe this is the 15-word definition Tamar deserves.
So those were just the 9 poems of students who wanted to share their poetry. There are many others, and they will be collected in a book. You'll see in the program that the book will be available, and I want to make a quick shout out to my dear friend Suzanne Sliker, who designed the program, which you can see today, and the book of Latouche last year, which is down there, and she'll design this next one, and we're so blessed to have the students' words collected there, and Tamar to be memorialized there. All right, I also wanted to point out the visual art. I'm sorry, one of them has fallen over, but Nadia, Serena, and Molly, you did a spectacular job with your visual art, and we're so grateful for that too. So please visit those. And they also are on a website, which again, the link is in the program. So if you all want to check out more work on the website, please do. Our closing speaker is my brilliant colleague, friend, and we're connected in many ways, Jamoke McDuffie Thurmond. And it was one of the great good fortunes that we happened to meet each other at a conference where I was sitting next to Dennis, and we heard Jamoke recite his poetry about his enslaved ancestors. And I said, this man has got to come talk to our students. And we set it up. He came last year and changed everything, and we are so grateful. Kids, let's all give Mr. Jamoke like a huge round of applause.
There's been a lot of really wonderful things said about me today, and I really appreciate that. On the way here, I told myself that I will save my tears for graduation, which I will, fingers crossed. But y'all are making it hard. You really are, because I'm so incredibly proud of the work that these young students have done, and the people who they continue to be. And just Caitlin, especially thinking about your poem and this idea of lies, right? And how lies are comforting. And I'm just so awed at your refusal, your collective refusal to hold on to comfortable lies, to hold on to easy lies. And I think that all the adults here should be incredibly proud and excited by the fact that we have a group of young people who are so invested in telling the truth, even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging. And I think that is a tremendous part of what we're here to do today. And so as I've been reflecting on the work shared today and the work that these students have done with this project over the course of this year, I'm reminded that attending to histories that have been forgotten or hidden or distorted is something that requires all of us. It's a practice that requires all of us. And this, what we're doing here today, is a collective practice of recovery, a collective attempt of restoration of dignity, and there's something so beautiful about that. And in a way, it harkens back to that concept of Ubuntu, which you have all in your programs, right? The notion that personhood is predicated on the personhood of others, that our personhood is predicated on the personhood of others, so that if I am a full being, then how could you be anything less than that? How could Tamar be anything less than that? And she wasn't. She isn't. And despite these legacies of chattel slavery, anti-blackness, and dehumanization, we are all here today to reiterate something that Tamar already knew, that her life matters. And it's hard to talk about slavery in this country. You know, there's a lot of shame that hovers over the conversation, and rightfully so. Right? There is reason to be ashamed of what was done to and taken from millions of people and their children and their descendants. But, like that principle of Sankofa says, it's not shameful to go back and recover those histories. It's not shameful to name what has been lost or name what has been done or account for the sanctity of these lives. And so this process of accounting, this process of honest reckoning with our histories and understanding how those histories inform the present and shape our futures is how we move from shame to grace. So let us live with the grace that comes with honoring, cherishing, and protecting each other. And may Tamar rest in that grace.
So in closing, I would love to invite all of us to join together, speaking of grace, in singing Amazing Grace, which has, of course, a historical tie to this history. And I want to invite my dear friend Siba up here. Siba, who came into our lives just a couple of weeks ago and shared her grace with all of us, and my beloved mother, who sadly passed away, but shortly before she passed away, we were gathered as a family around her bedside, and her favorite hymn was Amazing Grace. And she loved it, sung by Judy Collins, and sadly, none of her family members can sing like Judy Collins. So there we were in our sort of quavery voices, and suddenly this voice rang out, and it was Siba. And she is a part of our family, and I'm so grateful to her. Siba.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Actually, they hijacked me to be here, but you know what? I love her, so it is what it is. Okay, so I hope you guys are ready. My voice is kind of out because I was away for a couple of weeks, and I was screaming. I had no idea why, but yes. So I'm just gonna lead, and then you could just join me or anything like that. So I'm gonna be as sweet and as much as possible. So here we go. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. praise than when we first began. Thank you.
So I don't know if I said this already because I was sort of speaking extemporaneously, but Siba sang that hymn for my mom, and her breathing slowed, and then she sang a second hymn, which is a hymn in Zulu. Translated, the English version would be called Redeemed, but Siba introduced it and said this was the song she sang for her mother, who also passed away, and it's called Hlengiwe. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it is the most beautiful piece of music I have ever heard. And my mother, shortly thereafter, left us. And I think about this grace, that I think she left us with grace, and I wish grace for Tamar and Latus. And thank you, all of you. Pat Wilson Phineas, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Dennis, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Everyone, students, well done.